The NFC Championship game will be played in Atlanta this year, where the Falcons will host the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco is currently installed as a 3.5-point road favorite on BETDAQ, 48 the total in this game. The 49ers obviously getting a lot of respect here after their impressive 45-31 win over the Green Bay Packers last week. The story of that game was San Francisco quarterback Colin Kaepernick. Kaepernick's coming out party, he started the last half of the season, so we all knew what he was about, but I don't think anybody saw last week's game coming. Set an NFL record for rushing yards by a quarterback in any game with 181 rushing yards to go along with 263 passing yards. The Green Bay defense could not stop this guy. And when you combine that San Francisco offense, the one we saw last week, the explosive offense that hung 45 on the Green Bay Packers, with this 49ers defense that has been dominant all season, San Francisco finishing the year ranked third in the NFL in total defense, second in points allowed. When you combine that defense with that offense, you might have the best team in the NFL, and that's why San Francisco has been a very popular public bet this week. This line has moved to 4, most places out in Las Vegas, 4.5 some places in Vegas. We mentioned it is still San Francisco minus 3.5 on BETDAQ. Now, I understand the line move. I understand the public's affinity for San Francisco in this spot. As we mentioned, the 49ers, they looked great last week, and Atlanta has looked less than great over the last month or so. 2-2 in the month of December. And last week in their win over the Seattle Seahawks, a fourth quarter, to say shaky, that would be a little kind to the Atlanta Falcons. A total collapse, meltdown, whatever word you want to use in the fourth quarter. Nearly a historic defeat for Atlanta. What would have been the largest blown fourth quarter lead in the history of the NFL in the postseason, of course. Atlanta up 27-7 heading into the fourth quarter, yet fell behind 28-27 with 25 seconds left. Matt Ryan then completing 2 passes in 12 seconds to set up Matt Bryant for the 49-yard game-winning field goal. And you could just see the relief wash over the Atlanta coaches and players at the end of that game, because the lack of postseason success had been the monkey on this team's back. Ever since Mike Smith took over as head coach, Matt Ryan took over as starting quarterback, Atlanta has had a whole lot of success. They've won a whole lot of games, but they were 0-3 in the postseason until last week. And if you were watching that game, watching Russell Wilson lead the Seahawks down the field to what eventually turned out to be the go-ahead touchdown to go up 28-27, both Mike Smith and Matt Ryan looked absolutely sick. Mike Smith could hardly stand up, looked like he'd been shot in the gut or he was about to vomit or something. And we've heard reports over the last couple days, there's a rumor that Mike Smith, despite all his success, might have been fired if they would have lost that game last week. But they didn't lose it. They won 30-28, and Matt Ryan and Mike Smith both looked giddy after the game. And I expect the Atlanta Falcons to play like a team with no pressure this week. I think that is a legitimate monkey off their back last week. I expect to see a loose, confident team this week. And even though, as I said, I understand the public's like for San Francisco in this game, I understand the line move, can't help but feel that Atlanta is a little undervalued here. The Falcons, despite the fact they hadn't been playing great towards the end of the season, let's not confuse them with the Houston Texans. It's not like they totally collapsed at the end of the year. Keep in mind, this team 13-3 in the regular season. At home, they were 8-1 if you include last week's game. Their only home loss of the season coming in Week 17, a meaningless game against the Tampa Bay Bucks, a game in which the Falcons pulled some of their starters in the second half. Matt Ryan, in his career as a starter at home, is 34-5. Let me repeat that. Matt Ryan is 34-5 as a starter at home, yet Atlanta is a 3.5-point home underdog in this game. Something about that just doesn't add up to me. And, maybe people just have no confidence in Atlanta because of what they saw on defense last week. No question, the Falcons' defense was shredded by Seattle's rookie quarterback, Russell Wilson. Wilson threw for 385 yards and rushed for 60 more. And when you combine that performance from the Falcons' defense with what we saw out of Colin Kaepernick last week, you see where I'm going with this, and I think a lot of bettors are sort of picturing that in their head, and that is why we're seeing a rush to the window for 49ers bets this week. But I just don't know. First off, Kaepernick and Wilson are different players. They're both mobile, but Wilson uses his mobility to, for the most part, he did rush for 60 yards last week, but usually he scrambles to find things downfield, to let guys open up downfield. Colin Kaepernick, if he sees an alley, if he sees a hole, he's going to hit it. Now, in some ways, that's a good thing for the 49ers. Kaepernick is a much better athlete, much faster than Russell Wilson. He runs like a wide receiver, as the Green Bay Packers found out the hard way last week. So the Atlanta Falcons are going to have to be very aware of Kaepernick's running ability, even more so than they were with Russell Wilson. But Kaepernick showed last week he can make the throws downfield. So the Falcons defense, I mean, that's if you're a Falcons fan or if you're a Falcons bettor, that has to be your main worry in this game. After watching that defense last week, will they be able to slow down the San Francisco offense this week? You know, I think they will. This is Kaepernick's first start of his career on the road in the playoffs, and that's no small thing. Remember, throughout history, I know we've had a lot of young quarterbacks this year who've had a lot of success. However, now that we're down to the NFL's Final Four, we're left with one of the all-time greats in Tom Brady, a veteran who's been there year after year, especially the last few years, in Joe Flacco. Another veteran in Matt Ryan, headed to the Pro Bowl this year, who has everything on his resume except for postseason success. And we have Colin Kaepernick. So even though we've seen a lot of rookies and second-year players have success in the NFL this season at quarterback, still, as the season gets down to the nitty-gritty now with only 4 teams left, once again we see the veteran quarterbacks, for the most part, with the exception of Kaepernick, we see the veteran quarterbacks rising to the top and controlling things, which is par for the course really in the NFL. And when I look at the Falcons here as an underdog, I know San Francisco has a great defense, but the Falcons have a pretty good offense themselves. Top 10 in the NFL this year in total offense, passing offense, scoring offense. Matt Ryan averaging over 280 passing yards per game this year. The wide receiver tandem of Roddy White and Julio Jones, as good as there is in the league. Haven't even mentioned veteran tight end Tony Gonzalez. So Atlanta has an impressive offense. They should be able to attack this 49ers defense. I know that's no easy ask, because the 49ers, as we mentioned, as good as any defense in the NFL this year. But you know what? I like Atlanta's chances in this game. As I said, I think they're going to be playing loose, sort of pressure-free. Not that the 49ers are going to be any less motivated or are going to be any more encumbered by pressure, but I don't know. San Francisco as a road favorite, starting the inexperienced Colin Kaepernick. I don't like the sounds of it. I do lean towards Atlanta and the points here. Another bet you should keep an eye on here is the over. The trends strongly point towards an over bet here. In the 9 games that Colin Kaepernick has started at quarterback for San Francisco, the over is 8-1. I mean, the over has almost always cashed when Kaepernick has been under center. And the over is 4-0 in Atlanta's last 4 home playoff games. So I actually leaned towards the under in this game when I first saw the total at 48. But when I saw those trends, and then there's just been so much over football recently in the playoffs. Last week in the divisional round, all 4 games went over. That did take me off of the total in this game. So the bet I like the most here is Atlanta and the points.